but Howard's actually probably the most famous, not famous person that you know, if that makes sense. Uh, so, so I want to welcome Howard first off. And Howard, we started the show in a single way with a stupid question. So I'm going to start off with that right away. If you could be any animal that exists or doesn't exist, what would you choose to be?
Oh my God, that's a really tricky one. Um, yeah, I would probably choose to be a cuttlefish because they're very smart. They can squeeze through the opening of a soda bottle, and they can change colors to fit the landscape that they're on. And they're a hell of a lot smarter than most of the land animals like cheetahs and lions and other things that you could imagine being. I mean, their sex lives, I imagine, are horrendous, but everybody's sex lives are horrendous, no matter what species you pick.
That's right.
So, so cuttlefish, I'll go with. Plus, think of all those extra arms, Jesse.
In orifices that never mind.
Yes.
Um, so the reason I ask that is because sometimes people are uncomfortable with this stuff. You've been doing it for a long time, so of course you're not. But Howard, can you tell us about yourself and about Einstein and stuff like that,
Well,
and about
okay, I have a new book out. It's my seventh
Okay.
book. It's called Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me: A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. And it's my rock and roll adventure. It's my adventures founding the biggest PR firm in the music industry and working with Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, Aerosmith, CD, Kiss, Queen, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, Run DMC, people like that.
Okay.
And the weird thing is that I'm not a popular culture person. Yes, I love music. I mean, I absolutely adore music. I can't exist without music. But the fact is, at the age of 10, I started out in theoretical physics and microbiology. And by the time I was 12, I had accumulated some scientific chops. I co-designed a computer that won some science fair awards. I had built my first Boolean algebra machine. I had been schlepped off to the University of Buffalo to meet with the head of the graduate physics department at the University of Buffalo. He kept me in his office for an hour because we were debating the hottest scientific topic of the time: Big Bang versus steady state theory of the universe and the interpretation of the Doppler shift. And when he walked out of his office, he towered above me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said to my mom, "You don't have to stay for grad school for him. He'll get fellowships in theoretical physics at any university he wants." And my mom had arranged for me to be tutored in outside the box science by a guy who was the head of research and development for the company that made the valves for the first plane to break the sound barrier and the first plane to take humans to the edge of space, the Bell X-1 and the Bell X-2. So, and then at the age of 13, I realized I was an atheist. And my parents tried to drag me off to high holiday services, and I didn't want to go. I'm Jewish, and I'm a Jewish atheist. And they got me all the way to Richmond Avenue, where the synagogue was, and I refused to go any further. And I was holding onto the sturdy frame of this American-made automobile, their blue Fraser four-door automobile, and they were tugging at my socks. And I had a sudden realization that, okay, I'm an atheist. So there are no gods in the sky. There are no gods beneath the ground. But there are gods in this picture. In the passion that is somehow motivating my parents to claw at the ankles of their eldest son, and if necessary, be willing to drag him up the sidewalk to get him to the synagogue. In other words, there are gods in my parents. And if there are gods in my parents, then those gods are in me. And my two heroes at the age of 10 were Galileo and Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Galileo took a device that had just been invented, a military device, to let you see an army coming over the horizon. It had a long tube and it had lenses at both ends. And he did something outrageous. He took this device that was designed for horizontal viewing, and instead of turning it horizontal, he turned it up to the sky. Now that's outrageous, Jesse, because everybody knew what was in the sky. That's God's underwear. That's the underside of the rug to God's living room. How dare you turn a lens up to that sky? Plus, everything was perfect circles. Aristotle had said circles are perfection. God is perfection. God makes the sky, so the sky is perfection. So everything is perfect. And what Galileo discovered is that there are planets, and the planets look like lumpy balls, and they have crags and all kinds of disfigurements. And it's not the perfect sky that everybody believed at all. And Anton von Leeuwenhoek took that same high-tech device, the lens. He was a draper. He imported fabrics. He used the lens to look at fabrics and see how tight the weave was, what the quality was of the drapes. And he turned that lens down, and he looked at pond water, and he discovered there was an entire world that we had lived with ever since we were human and had never known existed. Microbes, protozoa, all kinds of tiny little creatures. He called them animalcules. And I suddenly realized that my parents were clawing at my ankles. One turned the lens up, one turned the lens down. My job was to turn the lens inside and to find the gods inside of it. And I've been on the track of that ever since. And I've been on the track of the ecstatic experience, because my synagogue in Buffalo, New York was like a Lutheran church. There were narrow wooden pews, and you had to shuffle your way sideways down to get to your seat. And then once you were in your seat, you were a prisoner. You were absolutely trapped. And you stood up when the rabbi told you to, and you recited when he told you to, and then you sat down again. Well, I had this inkling that there was another kind of religion, ecstatic religion, in which the gods enter your body and take you over utterly. And I wanted to find that ecstasy, and I knew that ecstatic experience was somehow related to the forces of history, because Adolf Hitler had used it, and he had used it brilliantly. And I wanted to understand all those things, the ecstatic experience, the gods inside of us, and how masters of this, like Adolf Hitler, had used it, and how it could be used to free human beings in positive ways in the future. So, and by the time I got to my senior year of college, after dropping out for 3 years and accidentally helping found the hippie movement, which is the subject of my book, How I Accidentally Started the 60s, but we won't go into that. I finally got to my senior year, and indeed, I got fellowships from 4 different grad schools, and I suddenly realized that grad school would be Auschwitz for the mind. Here I was after the ecstatic experience and the gods inside of us, and in grad school, they would have me giving paper and pencil tests to 22 college students in exchange for a college credit. And just how feverishly, ecstatically aroused by the gods inside are those 22 college students going to be? Not at all. I would never be allowed to go after what I was interested in. And I had an opportunity to go into something I knew absolutely nothing about, popular culture. And I took that opportunity, and I co-founded a commercial art studio, and I looked at it as a periscope position, because I was interested in finding the dark underbelly where movements are made. And I eventually ended up, first of all, taking a rock magazine and changing it utterly and increasing its circulation 211%. And one day I got a manila envelope from Chet Flippo, the founding editor of Rolling Stone, by messenger. Well, writers don't send things by messenger. They don't have the budget for that kind of thing. So I opened it up. It was 6 typewritten pages, and it talked about some munchkin hidden in a converted broom closet who was turning straw into gold. And it said that this guy had invented an entirely new magazine genre, the heavy metal magazine. He was talking about me. So I apparently invented the heavy metal magazine, and I know I did, because I gave the formula for it to Cream magazine, and I gave it to Hit Parader, and they used it, and we ended up being a category. And then I founded the big firm in the music industry. And my goal was to find the gods inside of people like Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Michael Jackson, all of my clients. Imagine this: you're a science person, and you have this permission to find the gods inside of Michael Jackson and Prince. What an astonishing privilege. So that's the story in brief. And then in 1988, after 12 years of running the biggest PR firm in the music industry, I became hideously, monstrously ill. I had been, since I started in 1981 doing the research for my own first book. In 1984, I brought heaps and heaps of computer printout to my friend Bob Guccione Jr., the founder of Spin Magazine, the son of the guy who founded Penthouse Magazine, and showed him all the stuff that I've been compiling for my book. And I had categorized it all and put it into prospective chapters. And he was wildly excited about it. And then I started writing it in 1987. And I was halfway through writing it, and I got this hideous illness. And I had no idea of what it was. All I knew was something was really wrong. My doctors had no clue. So I came into the office one day and I told my staff, I could be dying. I have no idea what's up here, but I'm going to be out of here in 2 weeks, and I'm giving you the company. And the next day I got a call from one of my competitors out on the West Coast offering me $350,000 for the company. And I had to tell him I'd given the company the previous day to my staff. And and I became too weak to talk, and too weak to walk any further than to my bathroom, and too weak to have another person in the room with me. And I was stripped of any sense of human identity whatsoever. It turns out your sense of identity is totally wrapped up in your sense of your future and what it is you aspire to do next. And I aspire to go out on the road with my book the way I'd gone out on the road for my rock and roll artists, take my wife with me, visit city after city, stay in Hyatt hotels with those wonderful sunshine yellow sheets, and looking out over the city 14 stories high, and do every morning television show and every afternoon newspaper and every media outlet I could. And all of a sudden, there was no possibility of what that whatsoever. I could not even speak. And I felt robbed of my sense of humanity. And I'd been on something called the internet since 1983. And eventually, it took me 3 years to a brutal experience to come to this, that I was going to have to reinvent myself on the internet, and that everything was gone. My wife was divorcing me after 34 years of marriage because of my illness. I had lost my business. I had lost my career. I had lost everything. I had lost my future. And that I was going to have to reinvent myself in this one place where I could go, because I couldn't talk, but I could type most days. Some days my hands were too weak to type at the keyboard, but most days I could type. And so I reinvented myself online. But the other thing I realized is everything that I had as a sport had been torn away from me, and the only thing I had left was my science. And I had to go back to my science. And in fact, Jesse, if I had chosen a fate for myself, I needed to get out of the entertainment business. I needed to get out of rock and roll. I'd learned everything that I could. When you two approached me, I wasn't interested. I'd done that already. When Mick Jagger approached me, I wasn't interested in that. I'd done that already. And it was time for me to go back to my science. And, you know, when you are successful in a field, when you are an idol in a field, a legend in a field, when you have 20 pages just on you in the Billboard Guide to Music Publicity, a standard textbook for music publicity for college students, your wife is never going to let you out of that. She'll never let you jump ship and become a full-time author and a full-time scientist. So I was lucky, in a sense, that I got ill. And while I was sick, I wrote 3 books, and I founded 2 international scientific groups while I was 2 weeks. So it was and I had to reinvent myself. All of us are learning to use the internet more right now because of COVID. Well, guess what? I was pushed into this in 1988 to 1991, when there was no World Wide Web, when there were no browsers, when it was very primitive compared to what it is today. So that's the story in brief.
There's a lot to digest there. You're still there? Looks like
yeah, I'm still here. There's a lot to digest because when I was 16, I was absolutely immersed in poetry. I loved poetry. And I found 2 poems, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot, and a poem called Renaissance by Edna St. Vincent Millay. And those 2 poems, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, said, if you have something important to you to do, if you feel you have something that's going to define you, if you have something that's going to do by young girls crawling to your feet, start it now. Start it today. Do not wait until tomorrow. Do not wait until next week. Do not wait until next month. If you put it off, you will be putting it off until you're 50. And then at 50, you will wake up and realize you no longer have the life energy to do it. And as a consequence, that thing you think is most you in this universe will never, ever happen. And you will live a life of failure. So if you have something important to do, start it now. And the other poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay said, if you want to see the infinite in the tiniest of things, you have to experience every extreme of the human experience. And there was one more thing. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock referred to His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. And in To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell, Andrew Marvell says, Thus, let us take all our strength and all our sweetness and roll it up in one ball and roll it with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our son stand still, yet we will make him run. In other words, death is inevitable for all of us. But if you manage to cram 7 lifetimes into one, you will have cheated death and given death a big middle finger. So that's what I've been doing. I was asked to give a presentation in New York on living 7 lives in one. And when I sat down and started to count, I've lived more like 25 lives in one. And that, I mean, if you want to cheat death, that is the way to do it.
So I have a question about your story and how your story can actually be used right now in society. Your story is literally reinvention, reinvention, reinvention. And in the world we live in, let's face it, a lot of people are afraid of what's coming in the next 3 years because of all this stuff that's going on. What would you say to people that do need to reinvent themselves again and get past what they're worried about?
Well, crisis often forces us into doing things that have been implicit in us and we haven't even recognized. And this crisis is forcing us all to work from home. I'm working on an article right now. I did an article 10 years ago called The iPad is the New Guillotine. And it said that because we can now all work in cafes and clubs and work on our cell phones and work on our laptops, the office and the office building was about to become obsolete. And that big child, the biggest child of the office and the office building, is bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is indifferent and it crushes people arbitrarily. But if we're out doing our work in cafes, or if we're out among the kinds of people that buy our service, instead of being isolated in a big office building, it's easy for the sake of playing politics with the other people in your company to crush a few people here and there, or a few hundred people here and there. When you're out among those people, you have a greater sense of empathy for them. You're on their side, in addition to being on the company's side. And that's what the company needs you for, to be on the side of the people that you're serving. Because the more you can serve those people well, the more you can shepherd your flock, the more money ultimately your company will make, the more trust your company will gain, and the more your company and you will offer to society. So I wrote the piece 10 years ago. It appeared in Kurzweil AI, Ray Kurzweil's publication. And I'm updating it now because people are being forced to go online. Companies like Facebook and Google are realizing they're telling their employees when this is all over, continue working from home. The governor of Connecticut thinks that that the amount of money that corporations spend on large office building space is going to go down by 30%. And the people in Connecticut will no longer commute to Manhattan to go to work. Says he's had conversations with several CEOs about this. Well, that means you can work among the people you serve. And that will destroy the bureaucratic attitude that crushes people automatically. And imagine you're working for a big health insurance company. Your job at a health insurance company has been sucker as many people as you can into buying your health insurance and paying for it. Then when they get sick, find as many reasons as possible not to give them the money that was part of the deal. Because the deal is, I'll take your money every month, and if you ever get sick, I'll take care of you. But the insurance company's job, it puts a lot of people to work trying to figure out how to screw you out of your health insurance if you get seriously ill. That's going to be harder to do when you are working from a cafe and the kind of people that you are trying to screw are all around you.
I think a lot of what society is going through right now, people don't realize where it's actually going to head. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are. There's no reason for an accountant to ever go back to the office. There really isn't. They can do their job from home, right? The company can buy them a laptop, and you're working from home now. Here you go.
Right.
Earlier in the show, you talked about, and we're gonna pick it apart, but Hitler and what he did with his ideas and how he was able to mold a generation of a country. And specifically, you grew up Jewish. So how do you reconcile that he had good ideas with he also had a horrible bad idea as a Jewish person. And this is just on me personally. I apologize for a weird question, but it's good to know the deeper thoughts, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, okay. The Holocaust happened the year I was born.
Okay.
So I grew up in an era when Holocaust awareness was huge. But I wanted to know how Hitler accomplished his work. I didn't see positives in it at all. But we all have a need to feel that we are a part of something much, much bigger than ourselves. That's what gives our lives a sense of meaning. It also can exhilarate us. It's one of those ecstatic experiences we were talking about. Hitler would throw torchlight parades at 10 o'clock at night on the biggest boulevard of Berlin, the Unter von Linden. And the troops would be 7 abreast. People would be packed on the sidewalk so tight, and maybe you've experienced this in a subway or something like that. But people would be packed in so tight that if you lifted your feet off the ground, you wouldn't have budged. You would have stayed upright because the people around you were so tightly pressed around you that they held you in place without even knowing it. And as those men with torchlight, those goose-stepping military guys with soldiers with torches went marching down the street, you felt taken out of your own body. You felt absorbed in something higher than yourself. You felt absorbed in what Hitler called Ein Volk, meaning one tribe that's been together since the beginning of time and has common memories woven into its biology. So Ein Volk, tribe, Ein Reich, one government, Ein Führer, one leader. And it was fucking exhilarating, absolutely exhilarating. So people like Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt had to somehow invoke the same kind of sense of being a part of something higher than yourself that you were willing to live and die for in order to win World War II and in order to keep the whole world from being Nazified. And Churchill did it with the power of his oratory. He said, we will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them on the trenches. We will fight them in the fields. We will fight them in the cities. We will fight them on the rooftops. And he roused people with the quality of his oratory. Well, all of these people are required for the sake of making history, for the sake of saving Western civilization, in the case of FDR and of Churchill. They are required to lift us out of ourselves in order to inspire us to be willing to live and die on behalf of something higher than ourselves. And I, with a series of accidents, ended up in the rock and roll business. And when I went to my first rock and roll concert, Fleetwood Mac, at Carnegie Hall, Fleetwood Mac was a dying blues band. There were 2 major British blues bands, Fleetwood Mac and Chicken Shack. And everybody knew they were part of the past and they were about to disappear. And this is before Lindsey Buckingham and what's her name, the singer, showed up on the scene to save them. So there was this concert. The place was packed, 3,500 people. The lights went down. When the lights were still on, we were all finding our seats, and we were all painfully aware of how we looked to the people behind us and the people on either side of us. And we were trying to look cool. And then the lights went, and the music started, and we lost our sense of self-consciousness. We stopped performing for the people around us. We became absorbed in what was going on the stage in some magic, transcendent way. And then half an hour into the concert, the lights went on in the auditorium above our heads, and the lights and sound went down on the stage. The group was now totally, and Mick Fleetwood, they could have canceled the concert at that point. But instead, Mick Fleetwood came to the very lip of the proscenium, this tall 6'6" string beam of a guy, and said, we've lost the electricity, fuck it. We are going to rock and roll. And he brought us together as a crowd into a single entity, into something higher than ourselves, in a way we had never imagined, because he was helping us transcend a moment of crisis. He was helping us transcend a moment of stress. And I realized I was in the land where the gods are. I was in the land where those transcendent experiences happen all the time, and they don't result in anything violent or evil or cruel at all. I was where I needed to be in order to do what I had wanted to do at the age of 13. Turn the lens inside of it, find the gods inside, find the ecstatic experiences, find the experiences that make us feel a part of something much, much bigger than ourselves and that are the forces of history. And this book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, is about this strange adventure and about finding the souls of Michael Jackson in particular, because he's the most important person I have ever met on the planet. And remember, in addition to all those rock stars, I've worked with Buzz Aldrin and Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man on the moon, and the 11th president of India, Dr. APJ Kalam, who was the most famous politician in Southeast Asia. I've worked with some very important people, but nobody comes close to Michael Jackson. So it's about finding the soul of Michael Jackson, of Prince, of Bob Marley, of Bette Midler, of Billy Joel, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, people like that. And we're right now with an echo, and we're doing perfectly well despite that echo. Well, one day we were sitting, Peter Gabriel and I, and Larry Fast is his keyboardist and is a computer genius. We're sitting in this hotel room in LA, at a hotel where all the rock and rollers used to stay. And Peter said, I want to show you something. And he jiggered a phone, he took the phone apart, he put a couple of spare parts into it, and put it back together again. And he handed it to Larry Fast. And Larry, he said, try to speak. And Larry tried to speak. And he got out 4 words, and then he couldn't speak anymore. Why? Because Peter had put a delay on the phone and put a deliberate echo on the phone. And Peter was trying to demonstrate that once you started to try to talk with an echo, it would stop you. The echo would stop you dead in your tracks after 5 to 12 words. Then he tried it himself. He was stopped dead in his tracks after 5 to 12 words. Then he gave it to me. I gave him a 15-minute soliloquy without stopping. Because when I was a little kid, nobody in my hometown wanted me. My parents didn't want me. My other kids did not want me. I had no companions of any kind. I wasn't the least bit interested in sports. I wasn't the least bit interested in anything that other kids were involved in. Instead, I got involved in science. But my one device for dealing with my world is language. It's the ability to speak and the ability to write. And apparently my mind has taken all of those circuits that in a normal boy are dedicated to sports statistics and has used them, just recruited them, kidnapped them into the language process. So there is so much redundancy in the language portions of my brain that, yeah, you can give me an echo and apparently you can stop a tenth of my linguistic ability and the other 9/10 just go, fuck you, and keep on going.
I'm a showman. The show goes on. Doesn't matter if there's an echo or not. No matter what, I understand completely. We're at 28 minutes. Once again, can I get you? Where can people buy your book? Number one, and then we're going to end at about 30 minutes, if that's okay. So where can people buy your book?
The book is Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me: A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. Bookstores are closed right now. They may be open in the next few weeks. It's very hard to tell. The best place to get the book is Amazon. You can also get it online at barnesandnoble.com. You can also get it online at bookstore.org. But I recommend Amazon. Amazon's been saving my life since 1995.
Yeah, awesome. So before we end, I have one last question for you. And in this COVID stuff, we all can't get out of the house basically, or not properly anyway, to communicate with people properly. What's one thing you've done today for yourself, not for anybody else, but for yourself, that you've done just to make you happy?
I walk 6 miles a day in Prospect Park, which is the most gorgeously designed park I've ever seen in any city in the world. And I've been in Moscow, Amsterdam, Paris, Kuala Lumpur, Seoul, Korea, and Chengdu, China. And nothing compares to it. And that means I'm out there 2.5 hours a day. And it's gorgeous, it's glorious. I'm listening to the books on my headphones, so I'm catching up on my reading, or I'm doing phone meetings. So I'm multitasking while I'm out there. But it saves my life, Jesse. It saves my life.
Just looking at the chemistry of doing that much exercise, it would change a whole person's outlook on life in general, just the endorphins and stuff that happen. So
to see the sky, to see the sky spread out above you in a way that you can't when you're in city streets, to see greenery on every side of you, or even to see black trees barren in the winter on either side of you, is a stunning experience. Leo Wilson, father of sociobiology, calls it biophilia. And there is a lot of research that shows when you expose people to green stuff, to plants, they heal better and they live longer.
Yeah, where I live in the prairies, so middle of Saskatchewan, if you even know where that is.
Oh, amazing.
But yeah, the closest skyscraper is 2.5 hours away from me, so I
Amazing.
understand the green stuff. I want to thank you very much for coming on, Howard. This has been enlightening, yeah, I guess would be the proper word. We end every show with a simple thing. I'm going to get you to wave and just say bye-bye to everybody who did watch. And I want to thank everyone who did watch very much for watching the Jesse Lewis Show. Once again, Howard Bloom, go buy his stuff. There'll be a link here somewhere. And say
yes,
bye-bye.
thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to see us. Hopefully I'll see you again soon.